about and what the forum's goals and ambitions are, particularly for this event, I thought I'd let you know what's going to happen this week. After the keynote sessions today, we're breaking out into 4 tracks. And the 4 tracks are exactly the same topics that Nick just outlined there. You'll find out about agile business and IT, customer engagement and analytics, delivering enterprise services, and my favourite, disruptive innovation. So they'll be the 4 themes of the tracks that will be going on after the keynotes today. And you'll hear what the TM Forum is doing to address all of these. In these presentations, you're going to hear about over 100 case studies, panels, roundtables and presentations presenting all of these things. We have over 150 thought-provoking speakers here. We have heaps of business networking with over 1,000 attendees. There are over 335 companies in attendance, and 55% of the attendees are senior executives and decision makers, including 127 CXOs. So if you're looking for a job, this is the place to be. Keep mixing and networking. There's a lot of CXOs out there. So, our next speaker, very excited about this. Our next speaker is a senior marketing manager at Google, overseeing media outreach, and he's also an official spokesperson for Google. But he's also a famous author. His book, The Digital Diet, is described as a 4-step plan to break your tech addiction and regain balance in your life. I need to read this book. He's a really interesting person in terms of other things that he's done. He's an Emmy-nominated and award-winning TV correspondent. He's a host, author. He's worked across 4 continents, has appeared on, now listen to this, I had to write all these down because there's so many of them. He's appeared on CBS News, CNN, ABC News, MSNBC, BBC News, Bloomberg, Al Jazeera, English, NPR, PBS and CNET, and he's even made it on the Discovery Channel. I'm not sure what doing, but I will ask him later. And he's shortly to make the big time on TM Forum's own TM Forum TV channel as well. So you'll know you've hit it big when you get to our channel. Please let me introduce to you, and a big warm welcome for Mr. Daniel Sieberg.
Good morning. Thank you, Tony. All right, good morning to all of you. How's everybody doing? Pretty good? So we're going to talk about a couple of things today. One of them is related to the digital diet. How many people here made some choices this morning with the foods you ate, right? Yes? Maybe you need some little more coffee. All this is about, the choices you make with food. It's parallel to the choices you make with technology. And what we're going to talk about this morning are ways to think about how those choices with technology can make you more agile, more empowered, and better at whatever it is that you're doing in business. The second part of what I'm going to talk about is a story, and it's all about the importance of failure. How many people here have never failed in their life? Okay. So we're all in this together, and we can admit that failure can be a big learning experience, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on. But to start with, as Tony mentioned, I've worked at a number of different publications and news outlets. This is a sample of them. That's not me. Maybe no one thought that. I should point that out. And I also work at Google as the head of media outreach. So what that means is I work with journalists all over the world as they use our tools for news gathering. It could be Google Maps. It could be data visualization. It could be through Google Plus Hangouts, YouTube, all sorts of things. This is an industry that's gone through a lot of dramatic changes. You think about an industry that's going digital, has to be agile, think about new ways to reach audiences and consumers. I work with people in the news industry every day, and these are the same kinds of challenges that they face. They have questions about what to do to their business model. How do they reach their audience better? What is this doing to their global reach? And so this is a lot of what I do at Google. Just to be clear, I'm mostly here in my capacity as author, but we're going to get into some stuff related to Google a little bit later. First, I need everybody's help here for a little experiment. Everybody up for it? Sure. OK. I'll take that as yes. So I need everybody to take out their smartphone. Take it out. I know everybody has one. Don't look at me like you don't have one. Hold it up in your hand. OK? I don't see everybody holding it up. I'm not going to go on until I see everybody holding up their smartphone. You've got one. I know you do. Is it tucked away in your bag? OK. All right. Everybody has it. Hold it up in your hand. Now pass it to the person next to you. Just pass it over, give it to the person sitting next to you. Think of it as an introduction. Hi. I can almost hear the internal conversations that are going on. Don't judge my selfies. Did that last email send? Does this mean I can't finish my game of Candy Crush? I'm on level 90. It's killing me. So the purpose of that little experiment is to think about how you felt when you did that. How did you feel? Good. Relief, right? I can take a break for a bit. But probably a little bit of fear, apprehension, nervous, because today the smartphone is like an extension of our body. It's like giving somebody a piece of you. You know, as we heard in the opening video, it contains so much about ourselves, our personal life, our professional life. And so giving that up can be hard. And I want to assure you that what we're going to talk about this morning is not about disconnecting. It's not about giving up your technology. It's about using it more effectively and more efficiently. As I started to write the book, and by the way, I am not perfect at all of this. I want to be clear that while this has been something that I've discovered and sort of had to go through myself, I'm still learning through all of this as well. But as I was working on writing the book and dealing with all of these issues myself, I came across an ad for this device. This is the cell phone wrist holder. It's an actual device. You can get it in, I think, a variety of colors. And the idea is that if you've been holding your phone for too long, this will actually provide support to your wrist. So you can talk on it longer. 1995, it's in that Sky Mall catalog. It's in the back of your seat pocket. So this is the kind of world that we live in, right? Where we are really, really using our technology all the time. These days, I talk a lot about the tenets of the book and how I've dealt with this topic. I point this out because one of the terms that my wife had for me as I was struggling with all of this was glowworm, because my face was always illuminated by some kind of screen while I was lying in bed every night. Now, I don't know how many of you would disagree here, but that does not lead to great intimacy in the bedroom. So I would suggest that this is something that you think about in your life as well. And lest you think that I'm the only person who thinks of this as a technology reporter, and I covered technology going back to the mid-1990s, so I've seen a lot of the changes and developments here, but many of my contemporaries write about the same sorts of issues. You know, David Pogue, who just left the New York Times to go to Yahoo, among them, but lots of folks out there are thinking about this and wanting to be better at using their technology. Maybe you saw this appearance by Louis C.K. on Conan just a few weeks ago, and he talked about the concerns he had with his daughters using their phones. And I want to be clear here, I love technology. I am one of the biggest proponents of technology. I work at Google, right? So I am absolutely aware of all the amazing and wonderful benefits of technology. But when someone like Louis C.K. goes on Conan, and this video goes viral because people are talking about what he said, his concerns over how his daughters are using their phones, this means that there's really sort of something going on here. At Google, there are others, by the way, who sort of have an affinity to this. This is an event that we hosted not that long ago called Wisdom 2.0. If you're from the Valley, you know of this event already. If you're not, you should check it out. There are a lot of tech CXOs. There are people who work in the industry. They come and talk about being mindful with technology, how to use it more effectively. That's Arianna Huffington who's there. They get a lot of big speakers to come out and talk about this issue. There's also a colleague of mine who goes by the name Meng. His title at Google is Jolly Good Fellow. He often appears with celebrities and politicians when they come to Google. And this is a book that he wrote called Search Inside Yourself. And it's all about finding that balance, that kind of Zen approach to your technology. He's an engineer, and he is passionate about this subject as well. You know, we saw some pictures of, I had to bring out the cute kid photo. Well, I'm not calling myself cute. That's me on the left. That's my daughter on the right. Me on the typewriter, generation no idea, and my daughter on the right, which is, as we heard this morning from Nick, talking about his kids and their experience when they go to London and they want to have all that kind of interaction and augmented reality. That's true. That's the expectation of kids today. And in fact, for my daughter, beyond that, it's everything is on demand. For her, there is no such thing as a television schedule. For her, Bubble Guppies is on 24/7. As far as she's concerned, Daddy screwed up if I can't find it on somewhere. So there's an expectation coming with this next generation, and it's both exciting, and I think if you're parents in the room, you know that there's sort of, we need to have discussions about this. Apprehension, maybe, but you know, we need to talk about these things. Smartphone development. and adoption. This is happening at a dramatic rate in emerging markets around the world. You see up here China, the US, but in places like Indonesia, Brazil. These are countries where we may not have thought about smartphones and mobility and technology happening at such a rapid rate, but it is. And so they're facing the same issues. It's not just happening here in the US. And if you need a further example of how far we've come in such a relatively short amount of time, I submit to you this picture. 2005, that's when Pope Benedict was named. 2013, when Pope Francis was named. You see the difference? Everybody in the room has some sort of smartphone device. It's pretty dramatic. Here's a study, by the way, that looks at the relationship that we have with phones and our devices. And all of you got a little taste of that earlier. But this is one that looked at these students at Bournemouth University. And they asked them to go 24 hours without having access to their email, to texts, or any of their devices. And 11% felt isolated. They weren't put in another part of the world. They just had to give up their devices for a bit. And some of them actually kept them in their hand just so they could touch them. It was like a little comfort object. The phone was turned off, just to be clear, but they just wanted to hold it. We've also adopted lots of terms. How many people know what FOMO is? The fear of missing out. That's when you don't have access to the internet or can't get that information. And I know it's important. You got to be connected. I get it. But there are times when maybe it's more effective to take a break for a bit, and we'll get into that. Oh, and by the way, that was Dr. Martin Cooper from Motorola. That was one of the first cell phones out there. Now, this idea, this kind of theory, if you will, or this movement is appearing in a lot of other places, too. Some of them a little bit unusual. This is an ad for Chopin vodka. And the message, if you can read it, it says, "The internet can take care of itself for a few minutes. Life's fast, sip slowly." Now, this is a vodka marketing campaign that's talking about how, occasionally put things away and have those face-to-face conversations. So there's a lot going on here, but I want to be clear, it's not about disconnecting. It's about connecting the right way. The book goes into a lot of different ideas, and I'm honestly not here to sell books. If everybody in this room bought a book, I would still not see a penny from the sales of it. So it's more about the message of it and the whole idea. The premise of the book are these 4 pillars. Rethink, which gives you that kind of perspective and thinking about how far we've come and how fast. Reboot, which does ask you to take a little bit of time, maybe on a weekend, to put your devices away, see what that does to you. And I'll get into how it works in a business sense in a bit. Reconnect, coming back to those devices in an effective way. And revitalize, where technology can actually help us with our technology, which I know sounds sort of counterintuitive, but it is possible that there are apps and devices out there that can help us manage all this stuff. I don't know if these pictures look familiar to any of you. Maybe you've lived them. Hopefully you didn't walk into a manhole. But this is the world that we live in, where sometimes through constant partial attention, we are losing that kind of human interaction. And I am going to talk about how that could be a loss to you in a business sense. Same goes for people who are at an event or a museum or somewhere where they can interact with the world. Yes, you can have that experience augmented in some way, absolutely. But I challenge you to think about how it can perhaps be better if we sometimes don't have those devices out. Okay, quick study. This looks at when people are willing to be interrupted. There are, you can see there, a number of different categories. During a meal, while they're in the bathroom, I don't know about that. And there are 10% of people who are in that millennial demographic, let's say, who think it's okay to text during sex and to be interrupted during sex. Now, I actually wanted to find out more of their definition of sex. I'm not entirely sure if that's, well, we can get into the semantics later. But you can see how this is affecting people's lives. Looking up here, this quote is, "I fear the day that technology will surpass our human interaction. The world will have a generation of idiots." Except Albert Einstein never said that. But this gets circulated around online because people think it makes sense. They think, well, yeah, he probably could have said that. And so, again, this is an example of how pervasive this is today. And that sometimes this is the world that we live in. And I don't want that. I don't want you to feel tired and not productive and not able to be agile in a business sense. This is where multitasking, I think, can be a big myth. And there are an increasing number of studies that look at the effectiveness of monotasking and why this can be beneficial. And I'll tell you what, if you think this is all just not relevant to you or not accurate, the studies that they're looking at, I know this is a little hard to read, but essentially you can have a 40% drop in productivity if you are multitasking too much. Many people lose 2.1 hours per day by trying to multitask. And according to most studies, only about 2% of people in the world can effectively multitask. So the brain tricks us into thinking that we can do more than one thing at once. I know that I feel like I can have 20 tabs open and I can keep track of everything that's going on, but I would submit to you and challenge you to think about how multitasking fits into your life and whether sometimes taking a break, getting that kind of narrow focus on whatever it is you're trying to do will be better than having multiple browser windows and tons of tabs and all those different devices and juggling them around like this guy. And going back to those interruptions for a second, this also looked at when people are willing to be interrupted. 65% said during a movie is okay. 45% said during a meal. 33% said during a religious experience, which may not be that surprising, I guess, because people do have an attachment to their devices at all times, even during a religious ceremony. Now, I point this out because I think all of us in this room would agree that texting while driving is a scourge. We want to eliminate this. I've talked to a father who lost his son due to a texting driver. And it wasn't because this woman was texting her boyfriend or something. She was actually texting her church, preparing for an event later that day. An altruistic reason. Not something that was not meaningful to her, but the distraction caused her to kill this young boy. And I guess, religion, again, not a surprise that it's tied to technology. The Dalai Lama has more than 3 million followers on Google+. And Satan a Twitter following. I don't follow him, just to be clear. So here are a couple of takeaways from today that I want you to think about and put into practice. One is called the virtual weight index. This is something that I worked on in the book. You've all heard of the BMI or the body mass index. So the VWI looks at the weight that you can't see. And if you're thinking about being agile as a business person or as a business, sometimes it is that weight that you can't see. And so I ask you to go online and try it. And the idea is that you list all of the different devices, services, phones, all the tablets, all the smartphones, all the logins, all the passwords, all the social media, all the stuff that you carry around with you every day, and think about how effectively you're using it. What are you using it for? What are you getting out of it? And if you want to think about it in a business sense, what are you getting out of it from a campaign, from a market you're working on, from your customers? You don't have to be on every single platform and every single media in the world. You go back to data and analytics, find out which ones are most effective for you. You don't have to feel guilty that you're not using all of them. There are also products like Rescue Time, which I've used, and I don't have any stake in the company or anything else. But the idea is that you can actually compartmentalize when you're using the internet. It will track when you're on certain websites. It will give you data on the amount of time that you spent on them, what you were doing. You can tie it to different projects. You can even ask it to shut off the internet for a while if you want. So there are lots of different apps out there that add into that revitalized theory. GPS for the soul, another one if you have that desire to get a little bit of sort of meditative approach to technology, that's another one to look into. Also, it kills me when I see people in a business meeting or at a lunch or in a discussion with their colleagues, and everybody just has their device out. I know everybody needs to stay in touch. Again, I work at Google, I get it. What I suggest is that during the next business lunch or today, when you're meeting people here at the conference, ask everybody to put their phone in the middle of the table. Just stack them up like that, phone stack. And the first person to reach for their phone picks up the tab. So see what it does to the conversations. When I wrote the book, I interviewed a woman named Linda Stone. She's a former executive at Microsoft and Apple, and I remember I went to interview her, and she came rushing in and sat down at this table with me, and she dropped her device down on the table, and she said, "Daniel, I'm meeting a friend from the airport. He's coming here to meet me. He doesn't know where I am. If his call comes into my phone, then I'll answer it. Otherwise, you have my full and undivided attention. And I thought, oh, okay, great. And it said to me, A, I mattered, which was nice, and B, that she was really going to listen to whatever it is that I was going to say. And think about the number of times that you've had that experience with your colleagues. Maybe tried to get their attention. They're not listening. They're kind of off in cyber world. You know, it said a lot about the relationship with that person and whatever it is you're getting from them. Because if you don't want to listen to them, or you don't want to talk to them, then why are you there? Now, the same goes with your spouse or your friends. You could try the same thing. I suggest you work it out. Same goes with meetings. You know, these days, terms like iterate, collaborate, co-locate, as an agile company, you know, these are all terms that get tossed around. Co-locating, the idea that, you know, we're all co-locating this room. We don't have barriers, we don't have walls between us, a lot of open space. Same thing happens at Google. We have a lot of open spaces to kind of work together and collaborate. Well, in meetings, people are putting up barriers. You have your devices there, you have your laptop, you have your tablet. All of a sudden, you've got these fences between everybody. You're not listening to the person next to you, you're not paying attention. So think about, you know, the occasional meeting or the occasional time where you can all come in, think about some big ideas, put them on the table, not be totally distracted. Not all the time, but just create some time like that. Carve it out in whatever it is that you're doing. And as far as, you know, getting enough sleep and your personal life and being the best at whatever you can be, try not charging your smartphone in the bedroom. It's just one of those things that I feel like leads to a slippery slope of always on. And I know it makes a great alarm clock, but charge it in the living room, in the bathroom, in the garage. I promise it will take 30 seconds to get to your phone if you need it or you feel like you have to look at it. But give yourself a little sanctuary, a little break. There are lots of studies that look at how we need a little bit of disconnect time before we sleep. And you'll wake up feeling better, fresher, and more productive. All right. I'm not going to go over every tip on this slide here because I want to quickly get into a story of failure and how I think this can pertain to a lot of different businesses that see huge challenges but want to overcome them. Back in 2004, I had a front row seat to the DARPA Grand Challenge. And this was out in the middle of the desert. The race was from Barstow to Primm, Nevada, Barstow, California to Primm, Nevada. The idea was that DARPA brought together about 24 different researchers and universities from across the country to compete in this race of autonomous vehicles. This is 2004, so not nearly 10 years ago. The course was about 200 miles. The prize money was $1 million, so lots at stake here. And these researchers from all different universities came together. Here's one called Cajun Bot. That's from Carnegie Mellon, the Sandstorm. You know, these vehicles, they had great hopes for them. I remember being there, and there were helicopters circling overhead. It was early in the morning. I was covering it for CNN. Everybody thought, wow, this is amazing. This is a future. This is technology. Who's going to win this race? You know, here's a map. You could see that, you know, they had to go through all these crazy obstacles and terrain and deserts and trees. And there was all this anticipation and excitement in the air. So the furthest that anybody got out of that 200 miles was 7.34 miles. That's roughly about 4% completion. The rest of the cars crashed, caught on fire, didn't leave the starting line. It looked like a miserable failure. This was the Sandstorm car from Carnegie Mellon. This was the only one to go 7.34 miles. Just about everybody else totally failed. Totally failed. Okay, so fast forward to 2005. They tried again. And this time, most of the competitors finished the race and get to where they're supposed to go. Then it's on to the Urban Grand Challenge, $2 million. Now who can get through the streets, intersections, lights, you know, all kinds of different things going on. And in this case, the engineers figured it out. They got together, they talked about the problems, they worked on how to solve this, and they did it. And pretty soon the Grand Challenge became obsolete within a matter of about 3 years. Fast forward to self-driving cars, which is obviously a big project within Google. And these self-driving cars, which grew out of that project, and by the way, the engineers at Google thought, what if the computer was invented before the car? So that was the premise that they kind of took when they looked at this as a challenge for them. These cars have now driven about 500,000 miles with no accidents. I think actually the only accident was when a human got behind the wheel. Hopefully wasn't texting at the time. And so you can see that in just not even 10 years, with what looked like a catastrophic failure, turned into something that perhaps one day could be mainstream for our children. They may not even need a driver's license, who knows? There are lots of things that need to be decided and discussed here, but I just pointed out as something very exciting. This is my friend Jay McGonigal, who works with a lot of gamers and game theory and how that applies to business life. And I point this out because if you're a video game player, or you know someone who is, they're an eternal optimist because they fail all the time. If you play video games, you know. If you fail the level, my character died, I got to figure this out. They're problem solvers. And so if you see a gamer or know one, or they're on your team, or they work with you, get to know them. Include them in some projects, because I bet they're going to figure out a way to get through whatever challenges you have. And so I leave you with this idea, don't be afraid to fail. You know, we all love Homer. He's probably one of the most sort of optimistic people who doesn't care when he fails and doesn't fail. And at Google, we talk a lot about learning from awesome failures. Awesome failures, because you tried, you took some risks, you wanted to see what happened. You allowed your company to be agile enough to experiment and see what was possible. So, in summary, because I think I've gone over my time here, love your technology, love the internet, love mobility, love all of it, just not unconditionally. And then you too can be like Happy Cat. Wouldn't we all like to be as happy as Happy Cat? So that's going to do it for me. I thank you all for listening and giving me your attention here this morning. That's my contact information here. And I wish you all a great conference. And if you're not from the Valley, enjoy it. I think the weather's going to get a bit warmer as the days go on. So thank you all so much.
Thanks, Danny. Here, why don't we take a seat over here for a moment? I'm really, really pleased you mentioned that multitasking is a myth, because every woman in my life tells me that they can do it and I can't. So I feel a lot better about that.
It's like spatial relations, right, between genders?
But we are expected to do it, aren't we? I mean, my kids actually do it. They can do 3 things at once as long as they're connected to a computer at the time.
I just have to, can you hang on one second? I just have to answer this message here.
That's exactly the same issue.
You know, it's true. I think that there is certainly a way that the brain is changing with the next generation. I talked to a lot of neuroscientists, and they talked about the plasticity of the brain and how it's evolving. And as the next generation is using all these devices and trying to navigate them effectively, that there are parts of the brain that are changing, that are being shaped. Yeah. But we still have this reality of the world that we live in, and we can't always effectively multitask, even though we think that we can. Yep. And so part of this is just to give people some awareness. You know, pause for a second, think about how this is working in your life or not working, yeah. And multitask if you need to, but you know, think about it beforehand a little bit.
Well, where are we heading to now with devices? I mean, the smartphone revolutionised what we were doing, and we're carrying that with us all the time, as you illustrated. What's the next round of technology, and where are we going to end up? Are we going to be? It'll be wearable devices or devices built into our bodies? Where's it going to end up?
Well, you know, I think that there's certainly a lot that's happening very quickly with wearable technology, as you mentioned, and you know, that's something that I think is going to be increasingly sort of folded into our life. You know, gesture-based devices. In a sense, it's sort of they're becoming almost seamlessly part of our life, you know, that we aren't as aware of them. You know, we used to have to, technology was, and especially the internet, was a very on-off experience. It was very, I had to go log on, now I log off. Well, today it's much more sort of subtle, right? And so I hope that all of these conversations don't let us forget about our humanity as we, you know, rush to embrace all this stuff, which again, I love as a big geek, but, you know, I want to think about how this is working for me and not just do it blindly. Well, from one big geek to another. Thanks very much, Daniel. My pleasure. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks, sir. Thanks for being here. Yeah, I'm watching that and I'm thinking, wow, how many of those categories did I fit into? Well, quite a few, as it turns out. Well, our next section is going to be an interesting one. We have a panel discussion.